This scene we are watching on screen is possibly one of the most famous about the Battle of Berlin. It shows an aged and deteriorating Hitler decorating young soldiers of the Hitler Youth in front of his bunker in the courtyard of the Chancellery. But what is the story behind this recording? Who were these young people, and what had they done to deserve such recognition? And finally, what was the actual date on which this filming took place? Hitler arrived in Berlin for the last time on January 16, 1945, aboard his armored train after leading the failed Ardennes and Nordwind offensives on the Western Front. The main reason for his return was the major offensive launched by the Soviets along the Vistula River, which in a few days made its way towards Berlin. By the end of January, the Soviets had managed to reach the Oder River and were established on the western bank, less than 80 kilometers from the German capital. As we have already analyzed in other programs, at this point Stalin decided to secure the flanks before launching himself on Berlin. This unexpected pause gave Germany time to reinforce the defenses of its capital, resorting mainly to the elderly, adolescents, and even children in this final war effort. Due to the increasingly intense bombing of the city of Berlin, in mid-February, Hitler decided to move permanently to the bunker of the Reich Chancellery. It was from there that he would direct the final battle for the capital. Under the leadership of Arthur Axmann, the Hitler Youth played a crucial role in the defense of the Reich. Until the war reached German soil, teenagers as young as 12 took part in auxiliary tasks such as messengers, transporters, or anti-aircraft defense. However, when the Battle of Berlin began, many were sent directly into combat, fighting alongside the remnants of the regular army and the Volkssturm. Although there are no exact figures on the number of teenagers who fought in Berlin, it is estimated that at least 3,000 child soldiers fought in the city. In addition to them, there are some 60,000 Volkssturm troops. There is a great deal of confusion about this recording. It was not filmed during the Battle of Berlin in April 1945, as many believe, but on March 20th, 1945, in the gardens of the Reich Chancellery. The sequence was broadcast in cinemas as part of a military news bulletin, being the last known recording of Hitler before his death. Therefore, the decorated young men had not participated in the Battle of Berlin, but in the sectors near the Oder River. Thus, they were selected for propaganda reasons to represent the courage of the Hitler Youth in the battles that were to come. Days later, on April 20th, on his last birthday, Hitler held another decoration ceremony, but it was not recorded or photographed. This last action is the factor that leads to all the confusion. By March 1945, Hitler was in a state of obvious physical decline. The recording was thus carefully planned to minimize his symptoms. 9 days earlier, on his last visit to the front, he was seen with uncontrollable tremors in his left hand, although his mind remained lucid and demanding. His last public speech was on January 30th, 1945, on the occasion of the 12th anniversary of his coming to power. From then on, he was no longer able to give the energetic speeches that characterized him for years, despite Goebbels's continued insistence. Ultimately, this iconic recording from March 1945 represents an impossible situation on the verge of collapse, which would require thousands of young Germans to be sent into combat. During the months of February, March, and April, Goebbels was pressuring Hitler to make speeches on the radio. However, the German leader refused because, in his opinion, they would only serve to further depress the morale of the German people and the army. This was because he had no good news to give, and Hitler was aware of his deteriorating situation and did not want to be heard like that. Thus, it was Joseph Goebbels who took on the role of speaker to maintain morale and motivate the population to continue fighting. Goebbels, in addition to being Minister of Propaganda, was Gauleiter in Berlin. In his eagerness to show support for the troops, he personally visited the trenches of the Oder front where soldiers were reinforcing the last defenses of the Eastern Front. During one of these visits, in the recently recaptured city of Lauben, Goebbels was filmed congratulating a young soldier together with General Schörner. The town of Lauben, located on the right side of the Neisse River, was the scene of a hard-fought battle that represented one of the last German victories of the war. Its control was very important for maintaining the industrial area of the Silesia region, and hence its importance. This battle took place during the first days of March, during which the Germans were able to attack and destroy numerous Soviet tanks. The German attack stalled by March 6th, after having been able to recapture several towns. In total, it is estimated that the Red Army lost about 300 tanks, while the Germans suffered minimal losses. This confrontation taught the Soviets not to underestimate Germany's ability to counterattack even in the later stages of the war. With this in mind, let's now look at some of the decorated young men in these famous films. The first one we're going to look at is Wilhelm Hübner. He is a 16-year-old messenger for the Hitler Youth. Hübner risked his life on numerous occasions transporting messages between headquarters and the battalions on the front line. He also carried supplies and Panzerfaust weapons to the soldiers under constant enemy fire. On March 9, 1945, during his visit to Lauben, Goebbels personally decorated Hübner, who received the Iron Cross Second Class from the hands of his unit commander. This moment was carefully filmed for propaganda purposes so that other young men would follow Hübner's example. Shortly afterward, Hübner was flown to Berlin along with 19 other young soldiers from different locations along the Oder front. Upon arrival, they were given a large breakfast and new uniforms before being taken to the Reich Chancellery, where on the 20th of March, 1945, they took part in the famous ceremony in the building's gardens. As a curiosity, Hitler Youth leader Arthur Axmann informed them that they should remain relaxed and should not salute Hitler with the official salute. Axmann then awarded them the Iron Cross Second Class, and some were also given the Black Wounded Badge. Hitler then appeared with a large entourage of officers. He walked slowly among the young soldiers, exchanging a few words with each, shaking their hands and, in some cases, caressing their cheeks. Among those decorated was 12-year-old Alfred Czech. During the battle for Lauben, he flew 2 missions under enemy fire with his father's horse and cart, managing to rescue 8 German soldiers on the first sortie and 4 more on the second. He was sent to Berlin to meet Hitler and receive his Iron Cross. Next to him was 16-year-old Erwin Scheiderwig. After the brief ceremony, the 20 young men were invited to lunch in Hitler's bunker, where they shared their battlefield experiences with Hitler, Eva Braun, and other senior officers. Hitler, impressed by Hübner's story, identified with him because in World War I he had served as a messenger at the front. At the end of the lunch, each young man was given a wish before being sent back into combat. For example, Czech asked for an accordion, which was granted. After the ceremony, Czech was unable to return home to Silesia, which had been occupied by the Soviets. He was sent to the Sudetenland, where he was shot in the lungs during a clash. Luckily, he survived, and after his recovery and a period of imprisonment, he was able to return home in 1947 after walking almost 400 kilometers when he was just 14 years old. However, he discovered that his father had been executed by the Soviets while serving in the Volkssturm. Enraged, he threw away his Iron Cross, and soon after his family was expelled from the region due to the reconfiguration of Germany's post-war borders. Czech later worked as a miner and emigrated from West Germany, where he bought another Iron Cross and framed a photograph of himself with Hitler. He appeared in several documentaries and television programs until his death in 2011, age 78. Wilhelm Hübner, on the other hand, settled in Bavaria, where he worked as a mechanic. He also participated in various documentaries and died in 2010 at the age of 81. As for Erwin Scheiderwig, he appeared in a Dutch documentary about the Hitler Youth in 1973, but his current whereabouts are unknown. All the images we have analyzed were broadcast in the last newsreel of the Third Reich, broadcast on March 22, 1945. Although we have focused on the scene of the decoration of these young people, let us make a brief analysis of all the parts that this last program had. In total, this newsreel was made up of 7 main news items, each of them having a goal. Firstly, it tries to reassure the population as much as possible in relation to the brutal bombings that are taking place in German cities. Secondly, the advantages of a weapon like the Panzerfaust are highlighted, which can be handled by everyone, and it is made clear that it will be the weapon that will stop the Allies. Thirdly, the Führer takes the lead, and he is shown to be cheerful and confident, decorating some young soldiers who have distinguished themselves in the fulfillment of their duty. The fourth section is about the soldiers of the Volkssturm and the resistance that is taking place in fortress cities that have been isolated in the rear of the Red Army. Then, in fifth place, we are shown the great work that the German Navy is doing to rescue civilians along the entire Baltic coast, and its effort to send supplies to the troops that continue to resist in Courland and Königsberg. Up to this point, and despite the desperate situation, the news is quite positive, and they try at all times to raise the morale of the soldiers and civilians. However, in section number 6, everything changes, and for the first time, atrocious images are shown of what will happen to them if the last line of German resistance on the Oder collapses. Finally, and as a summary in the 7th place, images of the fierce fighting on the Oder are shown again, and it ends with the harangue of fight and resist.